Hello and welcome to the Tabletop Miniature Hobby Podcast. It's Matthew with you here, and let's just deal with the elephant in the room straight up. You'll hear my voice is a bit funny this week, and I'm not going to dwell on it. It's just that the wee one likes to share her suite of germs with me, and our latest attempt has resulted in this, basically me losing my voice. So I feel fine, it's just my voice has been a bit funny the last few days, but we won't let that stand between us and a good old chat about the hobby. So let's dive in. And the first thing I want to do is to thank our sponsor of this episode, Midland Miniatures. So when I first got back into the hobby, and I think it was 2018 or 19, but when I first got back into it, I was still only aware of Games Workshop. I didn't really know any of the other miniature companies, any of the other games out there. And so when I came back in, I was looking at the GW catalogue online, and there was just something missing for me when I started to look at the modern range of miniatures and started doing a bit of Googling. And one of the first companies I came across was Midland Miniatures. And I was immediately attracted to their range because it had a really, what I consider to be proper miniatures, if you like. I know we all have different opinions of this, but they have that really like old hammery aesthetic. It really reminded me of the more charming sort of Games Workshop stuff back in the day. And I know that they work with some sculptors, including Kev Adams, to create some of their range, their goblins and stuff like that. But they have so much more than just goblins. I recently made an order from Midland. I've just actually started painting it up. Going to talk more about this in the hobby progress section. But it was junior townsfolk, so it's a bunch of kids basically. And there was reasons for me having to buy stuff. I say having to buy stuff. There were reasons for me buying stuff recently. Again, I'm going to talk about that on this episode. So we've got a little girl holding a teddy bear. We've got a wee boy with a sword and a pot on his head. We have just a wee boy with like his fists up. So he's a bit hand-to-hand combat expert probably. Another wee boy, he's got like a hobby horse and a sword, and he's got a sort of like goblin mask over his head. So, kind of leadership character, I would say. And then we've got a wee boy with a football as well. So, a couple of reasons I picked these up. First and foremost, going to talk about Blood Moon shortly, and I needed a couple of kid characters for that. But also I thought it'd be really cool to put together a wee warband of youngsters because, Midland, they're perfect for, we talk a lot on this show about miniature agnostic games. You'll find any character on there, whether you're into Frostgrave, Rangers of Shadow Deep, Song of Blades and Heroes, Open Combat. You'll find anything you need on there, good and bad, for your own party or warband, and all the enemies that you might come up against too. So a huge thanks to Midland Miniatures for sponsoring this episode of the Tabletop Miniature Hobby Podcast, and you can find their site and browse their range if you go to the link bedroombattlefields.com/Midlam. That's MIDLAM. And so just talking about those miniatures that I'm currently painting at the moment. So I've got that gang of kids, and I've also got a jester from Midland and a sort of ranger character as well. On top of that, I talked about, on my last solo episode, I talked about painting up some android miniatures. Was doing a bit of an experiment there, and it's been kind of hit or miss, which is what I expected. But I've been messing around with them for a wee while, and I think I was ready to get back to painting some stuff, with a view to actually getting it on the table quite soon and playing a game with it. So that's why I've got those new miniatures on the go. And I've also got these giant flies as well. They're from North Star. I bought them a while ago when I first got into Rangers of Shadow Deep. Just hadn't needed them for any of the missions yet. But there are reasons now that I'm going to need them quite soon, hopefully. So I've started to paint them. And those are like, those are on those little, the clear plastic, don't know the word for them, stems, I suppose. They give me the fear actually because they're very knockoverable. Let's invent a new word. They're very knockoverable. So, with metal miniatures, you don't want to knock them over at all, but they are very light, so it should be fine with a couple of coats and a good bit of varnish on them. So some giant flies there. There's like 8 of them. So yeah, looking forward to getting cracked into them as well. By the way, for what it's worth, I'll put photos of these miniatures that I'm working on in our new Discord channel as well, which I'm pleased to say has a good few folks in it already. That's really, really surprising, but really encouraging as well. You know, we've had people in there just talking about painting and gaming and stuff like that, sharing what they're working on. So as soon as I'm finished recording this episode, I'm going to pop over there and just stick a couple of photos of these guys in there. You can find that at bedroombattlefields.com/Discord. And another thing I was asking in there actually was about the new contrast paints. I recently just found out, I'm pretty out the loop because I don't follow any, as I often say, I don't follow any social media. It sometimes takes me a wee while to hear any news, if you like, specifically like Games Workshop stuff. And I'm usually not overly interested in what they're up to these days anyway. But the new contrast paints, you know, I heard that they've got a new range out, and I had a wee bit of a look online, and as I've mentioned in the past, I'm a fan of the contrast paints because of the way that I paint. You know, I'm very limited, but I still enjoy the process, and I still want things to look good for my ability as well. So I do like the contrast paints, and I'm really interested to try out some of these new colours. I've been looking over them and trying to figure out which ones I should buy, you know, which ones would actually add to the paints that I currently work with, because I do have quite a lot of contrast paints, but I only use a handful of them. I tend to paint with the same colours, and I don't know if that's just a stylistic thing. I'm also colourblind, so I don't know if there's something about that as well. You know, it just maybe is more pleasing to my eye the way that I tend to use sort of reds, browns, yellows, and avoid like blues and stuff like that. So yeah, it'd be interesting to see. I'm going to try and narrow it down to, because they've released a lot of them, and I'm going to sort of say to myself, okay, you could have 3. You know, what 3 would you really like? And if I use those 3 a lot, then I could probably justify going and getting like a 4th or a 5th or whatever. But I don't think there's any point in just, you know, spending half your monthly wage on like a pile of them, because I think they are quite expensive, and chances are, you know, a lot of them either won't get used very much or won't get used at all anyway. So yeah, I'm interested to dive into that. But if you have used them, if you have an opinion on them or an experience with them so far, and you want to share that with us, remember you could get in touch with the show, hello@bedroombattlefields.com, or just grab us in the Discord channel now. That's an easy way of doing so as well. On to gaming stuff then. I've actually got a game planned with Robert tomorrow of Rangers of Shadowdeep. So if you're a long time listener to the show, you'll know that Robert and I have been playing through the campaign, the main book, and really looking forward to getting together tomorrow if all goes well. We're going to be playing the scenario, it's Mission 2 on the Beacon Tower, and it's Scenario 1, the Bridge Guards. So Rangers are they're basically trying to cross this kind of rocky wasteland, and there's a river, and they need to get across that river. But there's gnolls. There's gnolls waiting on, or not waiting on them, but guarding the bridge, and we've got to try and be as stealthy as possible to a point, and then probably start getting waded in and killing them. So really looking forward to doing that tomorrow with Robert. Going to take the microphone, and we'll have a wee chat before the game, during the game if we remember, and then we'll have a post-mortem as well. Hopefully not a post-mortem for our actual Rangers, but yeah, the list of stuff that you have to bring for this. We've got a Gnoll Sergeant, 6 Gnoll Fighters, 4 Gnoll Archers, 1 Vulture, 1 Soldier, and a Partridge in a Pear Tree. That could just be the Vulture actually. But yeah, the Gnoll Sergeant, I've got like a, I can't remember where I got this guy. It was possibly Midland, sponsor of this show. He's a kind of, I would say half lizard, half crocodile. He's naked, but that's fine because he's kind of half lizard. He's got a tail, and he's bigger than your traditional 28mm guy. You know, he's on a slightly bigger base. So I'm thinking he could be my Gnoll Sergeant. My Gnoll Fighters, I've got a range of Beastmen from Nightmare, so I'm going to use them as my Gnoll Fighters. No archers, I've got goblin archers, again from Nightmare, so I'll be using those as the archers. I've got my vulture there, also got a vulture in a Roman party as well, good old Vinny. And one of the soldiers, I'll go with another Midland guy, one of the sort of fighters that I got from them back in the day. So I'll take the camera as well. I say the camera, I'll take the mobile cellular, and we'll snap some pictures of the table as well. And on the subject of Rangers of Shadow Deep, I also recently picked up Blood Moon, which is one of the supplements. It's another scenario that you could play through with your Rangers, and it's all about werewolves. So this picking up this book kind of led me to making a couple of those purchases recently, because there were a few gaps in the miniatures that they recommend that you use. So again, I know you could proxy stuff, but sometimes there's I don't buy a lot of stuff, to be honest. I'm pretty good. So sometimes it's just nice to have that wee reason to go out there and pick something that you know you're buying for a reason. So there was one of them, it's a kind of ranger character or a companion character called Orla, like a female ranger, I would say, with a bow and arrow. And I didn't really have a character that fitted that bill. So went to Midland, picked her up. You also needed a young girl and a young boy. So again, went to Midland, and it just so happened that they'd released that range of junior townsfolk, which came in very handy for me. You also need the giant flies, so that's why I was talking about finally getting to paint them up. They'll come in handy for a lot of Rangers of Shadow Deep scenarios and missions, to be honest. 4 auxiliary companions, so definitely got the miniatures to cater for that. We need an old man, I've got one of those as well. Giant rats, got plenty of them for the first few scenarios. The wolves, so you need like 5+ wolves and 2 werewolves. So I went to Otherworld Miniatures. That's another company that you'll have heard me talk about in the past. I really like their range. So they had a good werewolf miniature, and they also had a miniature that you could definitely make look like a werewolf, if you like. So picked up those and those wolves as well. It also says you need a giant snake. Now, I think this might be a typo or a mistake. Maybe this got edited out, because I can't see, and correct me if I'm wrong, if you own this book, I can't see any other reference in this book to giant snakes. I think what it was maybe meant to say was like a zombie, because it doesn't talk about zombies there. And then when you go through and read some of the event cards and stuff like that, you could end up with a zombie, I think, coming out the swamp or something like that. So I think that was maybe an editorial mistake. But anyway, if I need a snake, I'll have to get back to the drawing board, I suppose. Maybe just make one with plasticine. So yeah, first things first is to play that game tomorrow. And then I think our next game of Rangers of Shadow Deep is going to be Blood Moon, even though we'll be continuing our main scenario in the main book. I think the nature of this game is, these things could just happen on your way to the next part. So, once they get through this scenario, they could deal with the whole werewolf crisis. And it looks a lot of fun, that rule set. It really does, because those 4 auxiliary companions, you're we'll do a whole episode on this come the time, but one of them could potentially be one of the werewolves, and it could be a different one every time, to be honest. So it's a bit of sort of Cluedo with bows and arrows and werewolves. But all this buy-in as well, it kind of made me think of the question, like, how do we decide when to buy new stuff? Because if you think about it, there are, different things that you could buy. You could buy miniatures, you could buy paints, you could buy games, but even a game, that's a very general term. A game could simply be a rule book that you're buying for like a tenner, or a game could be an entire boxed game with like 100 miniatures in it that need put together, they need painted. So it's quite an interesting question, when do you make that decision to buy something? Do you wait until you need something? In this instance, there were a couple of miniatures that I needed, but I've bought obviously 15 times the amount of stuff that I need, because I'm making an order anyway. It's a good opportunity to browse somebody's store and just pick up a couple of things that you think look cool or might come in handy for future games and scenarios as well. When you think about rule books as well, I'm very open to picking up a rule book without a lot of thought. I don't necessarily want more rule sets and games to play, because my big issue is finding the time to get together and play the games. It's not, lack of games isn't a problem I suffer from. In fact, I doubt that's a problem many people suffer from, to be quite honest with you. But I don't mind the thought that I might buy a rule book and literally never play it, because I just find a lot of pleasure sometimes in reading through a rule set, thinking about the mechanics, finding stuff that seems quite unique to the game, or maybe finding other things that you think, well, this must be the way game designers prefer to do this mechanic, because you see it repeated so many times. So I know very little about games design or rules or anything like that, but I do take a lot of interest in reading through them and just having a think about how they all work. And sometimes, there are wee rules and quirks and special features that you could maybe pull from one game that you might never play and adapt that into a game that you play all the time, and it might just make that little improvement to something that you actually are getting on the table and playing. And buying things like boxed games, I've done that literally once since I got back into the hobby. I bought Dungeon Saga. I was having a wee look at Star Saga based on my chat with Jason in a recent episode. Looks great. The stuff you get in the box and everything looks great. And I weighed it up and I thought, I don't really see me playing that anytime soon, as great as it looks. And again, like I say, lack of games isn't a problem for me. So I reckon I'll just keep that on the side for now. I don't know if it's still in print, so might not be just so easy to pick up in the future. But you know what? There are always new games. There are always new ranges. So I don't think that's something that I'll ever struggle for in the foreseeable future. Next up, I just wanted to touch on a couple of pop culture things, if you like. So me and the wife have been watching, I think it's season 4 of Stranger Things. Is it in its 4th season now? So we have watched all the other seasons. But yeah, got back onto that the other weekend there. What a fantastic scene in the first episode back where, they're kind of doing simultaneous cuts between, this isn't really spoilers, but there's a basketball game going on, and then there's a D&D game going on at the same time. And it's kind of, showing you the similarities between the two, because it's this big final roll, and they need a 20, and it's all slow motion, and you see the dice rolling, and I thought that was really great. As you maybe know, it's not a game I've ever played before, but it sounds a lot of fun, and it's obviously very influential as well. And like we heard on last week's episode about Tabletop Scotland with John, it literally is bringing new people, particularly young people, into the hobby, which is fantastic. I was in Waterstones last week with my wee girl. We were just having a wee look at the board games and stuff like that, because I've got some games in there, often pretty good ones. I picked up Escape the Dark Castle in there back in the day, but they've got 3 or 4 D&D games or base games in there. One of them an actual Stranger Things branded D&D starter set. They had another D&D thing, and then what looked like a kind of D&D for like younger kids. It had that kind of, not manga art, but I don't know. I don't know the term for it, but you maybe know what I'm saying. Just that little bit, almost like the illustrations you see with the Mantic stuff, actually. But I think it was designed for maybe slightly younger kids. So great to see, and all power to them. If that gets folk in the door and probably doesn't scare them away or scare their parents away in the way that Games Workshop will with their prices these days. And before you know it, they're into old school metal miniatures and Goblin Green bases and copies of White Dwarf from 1993. And from TV to books now, because I wanted to give a wee shout out to this book that I'm reading at the moment. It's a Michael Crichton book. He was the Jurassic Park author. Didn't realise he was dead, by the way. Just nipped on his Wikipedia. Died in 2008, apparently. I had no idea. But Timeline is the book I'm reading at the moment. And the reason I want to talk about it on this podcast briefly is because if you're into the Bretonian thing, if you like, if you're into Bretonia and the armies and the lore and stuff like that. This book is basically a bunch of uni students, bunch of archaeologists. They go back in time to medieval France, and it's very, obviously Britannia was based on that era in that region. And I think if you like that lore, that whole story world, I think you'll really like this book. It's a lot of fun, really good writer. You can see why he did so well. And I'm looking forward to checking out another couple of his books as well, because I'm always looking for new stuff to read. On Audible just now, I've got on the go an author, Robert McCammon, probably, to be honest, my favourite author of all time. And I've been listening to his Matthew Corbett series. He's a detective from America in the year, I think it's about 1701. And again, I really like that time period as well, that sort of colonial time period. Those books are brilliant, absolutely brilliant. Been listening through them for a few years now, and he's been writing them for probably over 20 years now. It's like seven books so far, maybe. But yeah, it's great. It's taken a proper Lovecraftian turn now, which is obviously, again, I love that whole thing, that whole unseen horrors, demons and stuff like that, just on the edge of reality. So yeah, I would thoroughly recommend those books as well. That's the Matthew Corbett series by Robert McCammon. Right then, I don't want to outstay my welcome. I know I don't sound great. Not that I potentially ever sound great, you might be thinking, but the voice isn't at its peak at the moment, shall we say. So just once again, big thanks to this episode's sponsors, Midland Miniatures. Head on over to bedroombattlefields.com/Midlam, that's MIDLAM, and check out the fantastic range over there. And a final shout out for the new Discord channel or server, whatever you call it, bedroombattlefields.com/Discord. If you go to that link, you'll be able to get in there and just join in the conversation. It's great to have a platform like that isn't one of these walled gardens, like a Facebook group or Facebook community. These platforms, they want you on there. They want that to be the internet, basically, and you maybe find a really good community or group on there, but the downside is you have to go to like your home page, and then you see all your friends in quotation marks, you see all their opinions on everything that's going on in the world, and it's just not a nice place. It's not a nice place to be. Designed to make you angry and stay on there, I think. So I'm really liking Discord. You just nip on there, you don't see any other stuff other than the channels that you're going in there to look at and maybe contribute to. So as I say, bedroombattlefields.com/Discord is where you'll find that. And now I'm going to start getting my miniatures ready for tomorrow so that I'm well prepared. Going to look out those miniatures that I need for that Rangers of Shadow Deep scenario that we're playing through tomorrow. And if all goes well, we'll get that game, we'll record some audio around it, and on either the next episode or the next episode after that, you could hear how it all went and see if our Rangers managed to survive, and see what Vinny the Vulture and Fungus get up to too. They're two of the less hardy characters, shall we say. So thanks once again for listening to this episode of the Tabletop Miniature Hobby Podcast, and we'll catch up again on the next one.